attorney and longtime member of the psychedelic community, Ariel Clark. How are you today?
I am doing very well. How are you?
Lovely. Excited to have you here. Where are you joining us from today?
I'm in Nouwejiang, which means the place where the rivers meet in what's also called Michigan. So the center of America's high five, that state that's shaped like a mitten.
It's one of my favorite parts about Michiganders. It's like right here.
Yeah,
No, more here.
yeah.
I bet the UP folks feel excluded, but they'll figure it out eventually.
Yeah.
Anyway, excited to have you here. I've been a fan of your work for a long time, and I think maybe we've only met once, and it was at Remind at Las Vegas in 23, but only very briefly, I think. But just very, very grateful you're here to join us, because you've been aware of a lot and working on a lot of issues in this space, and you have perspectives that are unique from purely, people of European descent. So very excited to have you here and share some perspectives on, I think we're going to talk about ethics, lawyering, and pain, hopefully.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Really, I've been a fan of yours and so appreciate all the work that you do. And, just really appreciate the invitation and the chance to connect and talk about the inner world experience as well. Certainly let this psychedelics thing, turn me inside out, as we should, I think, let it.
Yeah, I'm still in the landing process right now myself, but we'll hold it together for this show. So I want to dig into this ethics topic. When we were right before we were recording, you're saying, "Yeah, let's talk about ethics." And I wish there was a different word. And this is one of my favorite talk tracks because ethics, you as an attorney with the license, license might not be the right term, but there is a code of ethics that professional groups want you to adhere to. Often therapy has this, doctors have this, and like ethics is that term, and more specifically professional ethics. And I think like the listeners are probably bored of me saying this, but that's like kind of guild rules. Like, the basket weavers, like that's their guild. You follow those rules and you're cool. You're going to be a member. Break those rules, you're out. But like, what is ethics? And like, I don't know what the right answer is. It's not morality. That's something different.
Well, I guess the way that I enter into thinking about that is either we wear many hats or a prompting that Kat Conauer gave us, the founding board members of the Psychedelic Bar Association, in our formation time was, what lineages do you bring to this work? And so being a lawyer licensed in the state of California, I've been practicing for 18 years now. That's one lineage that I bring. And there's a set of ethics, language, terms of art, norms, value systems that go along with that. But then as an Odawa Anishinaabe Kwe, I'm a tribal member at Grand Traverse Band here in Michigan. And I carry two lineages. I'm mixed race. I'm also mostly Northern European on one side of my family. That is a whole other set of ethics, Anishinaabe law, Anishinaabe Gikendeso, and Anishinaabe ways of knowing, and our social norms and ways to be in relationship, how to relate. We could ask the question of ethics from that perspective, or being a native lawyer, or being a member of the psychedelics community kind of at large. Like, it's very limiting to just, as you said, it's like the guild. This is one framing. And I guess for me, I'm interested in the different lenses. Like, I move through the different lenses, thinking about the different, almost like circles of responsibility and communities that I am in service to. But truly, like for myself, where I come from around ethics is this moment that we find ourselves on this sacred, beautiful Mother Earth planet in a major ecological inflection point, spiritual, mental health, all of these ruptures that we find ourselves in. How can we be responsive to this moment, but in that so careful, sacred, good way? And that's a question, that is the question that is on my heart. That is a question that is alive for me on a daily basis. I'm talking about that really humble place, not where law knows the answer, not where the California bar knows the answer, not where, this new state that's passing this law has an answer, or international existing laws have the answer. In fact, like the way that the overculture systems have been doing things is not, some of it's beautiful in ways, but a lot of it is not in service of, well, life, or us human beings being able to continue to have life on this planet. And certainly we're going further and further away from that generative good living. So that's
Mm-hmm.
really like my question of ethics, is that from that place, and I walk the red road, so it's all informed by Miska Mikunang, which is the red road for me.
Can you expand on what that means to you?
Sure. Well, this goes a little bit to my personal story. And you had mentioned pain. I, like many Native people, I experienced what I guess in a very simplified way, inherited ancestral Native American trauma, and that looked like a lot of things: terrible nightmares for over 2 decades, depression, anxiety, and then ways of trying to cope with that, horrible physical issues and other things. Because I'm the granddaughter of boarding school survivors, there was a tremendous amount of abuse done, and then abuse from all sides, coloniality, all the things. And that shows up in our bodies, right? Gabor Mate, in his book, The Myth of Normal, is like our health is outside of us. It's these different factors, social and otherwise, not to mention, who knows, the microplastics and all the things. So it's like it shows up in our bodies. It's not like I'm unique. So many people have these stories because we're alive in this deep time of the seventh fire, which is like our prophecy in Anishinaabe country. And so that meant struggle. That meant living underneath, a lot of heartache, and then self-medicating in various ways. And then, some number of years ago, nearly 10 years ago, being given the grace to step, on the other side of that and start that work of that red road work. That's what I said in Anishinaabe Mo, and Miska Mikunang is red road. And we have different sort of specific cultural teachings that relate to other types of concepts. But for me, the red road, and for, different Native people, it involves, walking close to spirit and in prayer and in sobriety from those things that are not lifting us up in service of community and love and beauty and kindness and goodness, So it means many things, but that's probably good enough to
Yeah,
explain.
thanks for that. Yeah, circling back to ethics, we got Kyle and I, my co-founder here at Psychedelics, I got published in this small essay with our teacher Lenny Gibson, and the idea was to write a paper on ethics and the drug war. And eventually it came clear, the editors of the volume were just like, well, how about you just do a history of the drug war? And that was tough because I've read all these books, like, what is ethics? Like, I'm like, how do we have some sort of like real ground to stand on, philosophically speaking, when we want to talk about this, which is where I loved your line earlier, be a good relative. But it was this idea from Aristotle around some sort of sweet spot balance between city state and self, and like how it's not really well defined. You can't define that super well, but it's like, are we taking both parties' interests
Yeah.
to heart when we're going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think about the different, we are in relationship individually. You and I are here in this moment in our relationship connection. And then there are all of these other ways that we are in relationship in broader society with, you know, different ways that how do we relate to each other, let's say in how do we share our space? How do we share our space? This is a
Mm-hmm.
question. So, certain, whether it's the question of what is the cultural framing that informs the ethics, because
Mm-hmm.
one culture says, oh, how do we how do we relate to, I want those resources and you have them. How do we relate to that conversation? Okay, well, let's create private property. Although, of course, we know that didn't always exist, and Europe had the commons and all of that. So that was a very specific point of a shift that was very, impactful to the rest of the 82% of the globe that has been colonized by European powers. That that
Mm-hmm.
that 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 story was taken all over. That's, and then everything that involves, you know. And then you have other communities that maybe the way that, okay, I want this resource, how do we relate to each other in that context? I think about, often there was a treaty between the Anishinaabe people and the Haudenosaunee called the One Dish and a Spoon Treaty, which was after hundreds of years of being at war with each other. It's not like it was like all rainbows and butterflies. It was not. And they came together, and their treaty was one dish and a spoon. We have to share these resources, and this is the way we share. And these treaties are alive. And I'm learning about these things because I was raised in the schools that told me another version of history. So I just, with ethics, it's like, it really is, where are we, what culture, what framing, what does the place that we come from tell us who we are, and what are they, rights or are they responsibilities? Like Western law talks so much about rights, my right to do this, my right, this individual right, whereas Indigenous law is, what are my responsibilities? And that much, more collective interrelationality is foundational to to any of these questions.
That's cool. I often will say to friends or people I'm talking to, like, I don't remember signing that social contract. You know what I mean? Like this idea of like, it's a funny concept that was kind of like forced on us, like in a kind of brainwashy sense when, yeah. And I wonder if, like, to your point, if that's like a function of scope and scale, like, with dominator culture as opposed to more like participatory culture, where like, if you're going to be in a dominator culture, maybe rights are kind of part of it. And
Mhm.
that we need that as a defense against the dominator culture. And like, if it's a smaller organization, like maybe it makes more sense to have that responsibility. Um,
I guess I want to hold out the concept of imagination.
mhm.
I don't know. I want to. I guess I'm pausing on this idea that if it's a smaller, then that's how we can have a more participatory and recognition of this interrelationality. And as if, like, if we have more people, it thereby requires a dominator culture or something like this. The scope. I don't. I don't believe that. I don't. I and I'm going. And I don't believe. I believe. You know, imagination. What is being born at this time, because we are in a time of composting,
Right.
and the seeds that are underneath the earth, you know, to bring out what is meant to allow, if if it is meant to be to allow us human beings to sustain on this planet, then I'm keeping that imagination and possibility open that, you know, we can hold these value systems and ones that I don't know what they are. You know,
Hmm.
I'm praying that those what is meant to emerge that will be in service of that it will emerge. We don't know what it is yet. Our job right now, kind of to your point of like, I've, I've been, we've been brainwashed. I didn't consent to that. It seems to me like we're in this like waking up time. Oh, wait, I didn't consent to that either. I mean, I don't know if you know Elder Pat McCabe. She's Dene, and she talks about like, I took this whole class on mother law with her and a Haudenosaunee elder, and basically it's like learning about the doctrine of domination and discovery together and being in that recognition of, oh, here's what this dominator culture, this is the story they told and took around. And I do not consent to that. I only consent to the law of the heart of Mother Earth, is something that I hear said.
Hmm.
So it's like that. That seems to be, from my impression, the kind of time we're in is like that. Oh my God, that I don't want that. Do I want to take that with me into the next world through the portal from this house that's burning into the house that is sustainable,
Hmm.
or build a whole, maybe it's not, take none of it. I don't know the, we're not there yet. We're in that process.
I like where you put it onto imagination, and I think that's important. I think how I was positioning it was retroactively, but yeah, like it's not necessarily the case that these are the things that need to happen, but it's things happened, and now we have a really interesting, as a function of us being in this composting phase, as you said, like we have an opportunity to create something new and different and hopefully hopeful. And that's where responsibility comes in, right? There's this, like, is it, like, what is my responsibility? I think that's an important question. Like, who am I? Where do I come from? What are my responsibilities here? And these are big things that can come up in psychedelic work, right? Like, this is probably where a lot of the listeners have encountered these things.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And I also just want to name that, it's those responsibilities for us as individuals. And then what comes to mind is the Yoruban scholar Bio Akumalafe. And, he really talks about decentering human sort of, well, centrality in like this idea that we're going to decide where things go. And that also is analogous to, it's like what unfolds. We are not actually the center of everything. The non-human organisms, the non-human world are acting and acting upon us, and as if we think we're the center. And that's also a similarity with psychedelics, we can bridge back to these conversations around ethics or laws of, you write these laws, you decide on these, whatever the ethical structures are as psychedelic assisted therapists or policymakers. Here's the thing we're going to do as human beings. And then there's this huge, the actual medicines themselves. We don't have control over those things.
mhm.
What comes up, that is a whole world that we are not. You can try to write for as many controls as possible, but those are other beings that allow the unleashing of, so much that is none of which is in the control of the therapist that's sitting there, the lawyer who is advising the client, the policymaker who writes the laws.
Right. And let's expand on that a minute. Like this idea that these things can have agency beyond what we expect. And I I remember this like pre me trying ayahuasca, being involved with ayahuasca at all. Conversation with a young psychic in Boston somewhere, and she had some experience, and I was like, mushrooms and ayahuasca and all that. And I'm like, I wonder, like, okay, what is this relationship if we like this is a distinct entity. And I'm like, okay, to what degree are they feeding on us and us feeding on them? And like, what is that energy relationship like? And does it transcend, the normal 3D Earth situation? Like, really speculative stuff. Just like, yeah, that seems right. I was like, oh gosh. And I had this kind of like dark thought, given the ecological awareness I had at the time, of like, okay, is this just a gentle lulling us to sleep so we can do this eco collapse, right? But that doesn't seem like what's happened. It seems like there's a lot more ecological engagement, like environmental engagement, coming out of psychedelics.
I agree. I agree, and I will say that's been my own experience. As a Native person who was raised in this, this same, a lot of this same culture. Actually, these medicines have opened me up more and more to, oh, this earth that is alive, that I am a relative. So, you know, that's definitely been my experience, and a lot of people that, I talk to and see, and clients that I talk to. And I mean, I've been meeting with some different tribal leaders who are talking about, well, what are these medicines and healing modalities? We're having major crises in our communities. And I just happen to think about, the benefits that some of the Native folks were talking about for our communities. And isn't that interesting that it also includes like connecting back with the earth? We all need that, because we're around all these. I mean, here I am talking to you on a screen and through this technology, which is a privilege and I'm grateful for. But how do we do that and also hold this life and this planet so dearly, and in probably a very different way than we are right now, or have been, at least certainly a different trajectory.
Yeah. I often try to come up with language that feels a little more Eurocentric, so I'm not like borrowing from other cultures. And I kind of like spin off on McKenna a little bit here and say things like, what is the most valuable thing here on the planet? And I'm like, genetic diversity is the number one thing I come up with. Like, it took so long to get here with all of these species and all this diversity of life. And like, we're losing it at such an incredible pace and no one's feeling it. Yet. Well, some people are, plenty of people are, really, but like not enough of the right people for it to stop and slow down. And like, how do we kind of position ourselves as like, okay, our job is to like really protect that and let it keep going, because it's such an incredible project that we can be a part of. We are a part of it, but like, we're not really going to understand it.
Yeah, I mean, yes, and that question is really, my friend, that is a question on my heart for a long time. And kind of where I'm at with that is, there are a couple, like two main things. The first is what we talked about earlier. See what is actually true. It's like that surgical analysis of, how did we get to where we are?
Mm-hmm.
What are these value systems? What are these stories? Do I believe them? Are they in service of life? What's happening? Do I consent to that? Do I not consent to that? Just getting real. Like, let's get real, you know? And then from there, a deep internal looking at, okay, so how do I then shift since I really only have control over me, really, in my own orientation, in my relationships, in my immediate community, in my family, with myself, when I reach for a glass of water, when I go walk by, some trees, or do some gardening, or go to this, these choices that we make. And from there we can more healthfully build more healthful systems that will inform the choices we make through our work. It's the ripple effect. It's I That's where I am, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Is those two. See what has
Yeah.
been, and then look inside and build goodness from there.
So this feels like like we didn't plan to talk about this, but I kind of want to get into this framing around like, and I love how you said this earlier, the things that some people call psychedelics. Like what, how do you like to understand this strange basket of goods with all sorts of different lineages?
Well, I appreciated what you said earlier about the agency and aliveness and themselvesness of these medicines. I mean, I even hold that possibility and respect for those medicines that are created in a lab. I mean, what do I know? I don't know. I don't know. We don't know. We like to walk around knowing, but actually, it's much more generative and actually much more peaceful. And I can breathe a lot more when I relax into I don't know and I don't I don't have to know, that part of
Mm-hmm.
things. And actually I love making room for the aliveness and the theyness of these medicines.
Mm-hmm.
But you had a question about what do I see in the basket?
Well, it's a ridiculously poorly phrased question, right? Like there's so many categories of psychedelic, if that's the term we want to use, right? Like people like this term entheogen. There's all sorts of like traditional framings for these things. And I so
Hmm.
LSD being a purely like European thing, similarly MDMA, right? Like those are kind of new things. I've had conversations with Sandor Ironrope about this, and he's like, there's no, he has interesting feelings and thoughts about it, and I like to challenge him a little bit on it, but it's like a fun and helpful and good conversation to have,
Yeah.
when we're comparing these synthetic things that are, I don't differentiate between the creations of humans and nature. Like the creations of humans to me are nature, but that's like a different thing. It's like a hard conversation. And then we have things like ayahuasca, um, belladonna, peyote, mushrooms, and like there's. So I guess I'm kind of trying to ask like your perspectives on earth derived psychedelics and then like human derived psychedelics.
Yeah. Well, what's coming up for me right now is two things. One is to follow along the thread of decentering the human from in the middle of the Venn diagram as the all knowing one.
Mm-hmm.
Then that leaves a lot of then I'm in the wash of I mean it's impossible to say and I'm just
Mm-hmm.
really just letting you know what comes up for me because you know the spirit and the aliveness of these different if we're just talking about natural medicine certainly but even otherwise is so unknowable to me. I mean I've touched into a little bit of that interspecies communication for sure but that's my own experience. But
Mm.
then the second thing that comes up for me is less about these categorizations based on sort of where they come from, but more about what are the communities that are responsible to them and vice versa, you know?
Mm.
Because it's like, what is the human beings, what is my responsibility to that, to all of it, right? To the plant, to the fungus, to the chemical substance, but then also to those other human and non-human maybe it's the land that holds those medicines, the land that knows that medicine where it's from, the Amazon. How do we know what ayahuasca and chacruna, how all those other plants in the Amazon and the Amazon herself and this huge mother earth that relies on the Amazon to breathe and live and therefore us, maybe those plants need to be there for her. But then you think about also the human people. So there is that's just how I see. That's sort of what's coming up for me.
Mm.
And then if so then there's the Western legal hat. How would you? How are they classified in law? How, if there were safe and good ways that also included being a good relative to certain stewards of those medicines, for those medicines to be more available or legal in the United States, for example, categorizing them in that way, just like the question of ethics. It's like, where are you standing, And I think that's been a really big benefit of these last number of years is I'm imagining the recognition that there is not just one worldview, that really there are many, you know, more certainly more than this one that maybe a lot of us have been told mostly about for a long time.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah, there's plenty, right? Like each group has their own relationship to a very unique thing. And sometimes it's the like interface of the environment to the thing, to the people, to the individuals, and it's not just like two factors. It's like very multifactorial. Um, yeah, and we want to always pin it down for the Western thinking mind to like single cause, and that's not necessarily very helpful. Um, can be sometimes in medicine, but like things are a lot more complicated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. Cool. Well, thank you for that. Let's jump into some lawyer talk. I've spent a lot of time with a lot of psychedelic attorneys, and I mostly had a good time. And one of my first projects around psychedelic lawyering was around like religious freedoms in the United States, and I I'm not exactly a Christian, but I got a lot of Christian leaders together and said like, hey guys, like let's get together and like see what you all want to do together, and kind of did some facilitated group work and kind of started a fire there, which was cool. But then I started becoming aware of some issues around how some attorneys presented these things around safety for their clients, right? Like, oh no, you're fine. Like you got a First Amendment right. And like RFRA's there. And it's like, well, let's talk about like what is possible. Like they can arrest you for a long time still, and you might not be able to afford to defend yourself all that skillfully. How do you like to think about like lawyering in psychedelics? We don't have to start with religion if you don't want to.
Well, no, I really appreciate you starting there because you're starting from the place of being a client and what it is like to interact with someone. You go to a lawyer because, kind of like a doctor or anybody, there's this particular specialization. Okay, I have to go and interact with this system or learn this thing or do this thing in some way. So I'm going to this person, and in this culture, in Western culture, the lawyer is in the United States both vaulted, and really held on a pedestal and also looked down on. There are a million lawyer jokes. And I'm just I have a lot of compassion and sympathy for people who go to a lot, many lawyers, because I really feel, like I said, I've been practicing law for 18 years. And then I've also, been sitting in this question of ethics, not just around psychedelics, but how do we ethically relate to advise our clients, and in particular in quote unquote, I don't know, it's like emerging areas, things, or, because I worked in cannabis for a long time. So these questions of, okay, you have the law, but you have all these other factors that are at play here. This risk, this shifting cultural, political, different perspectives, different, almost like balls in the air, buckets to be aware of. And in psychedelics, there's yet another bucket or other buckets to be aware of, which is not only this isn't just, I want to sell or buy some burgers. These are very powerful medicines that may have relationship to other communities where we don't have a legal system in the United States, and I would even say internationally, that understand how to be good relatives and in relationship in these very complicated, very beautiful, because of all of the diversity, different, societies that exist on this beautiful planet, right? So it's like, there's a lot. There is a lot for any lawyer, and especially in psychedelics. And from my perspective, we have, as lawyers, because of that, I mean, my God, the amount that lawyers charge, granted, it's professional liability insurance. I ran a law firm for 10 years. I know a lot also goes into it. It's, there is also a reason on some level the rates are very high, because it's just a lot. But as high as they are, and also what you're agreeing to as a lawyer, which is to give your client a fulsome depth of understanding of what they're stepping into. And this is where I bring in what I talked about at the very beginning. For me, Western sets of legal ethics fall short. That's the floor. It is. We can't be doing the bare minimum in any part of our lives at this point, from my perspective.
Mm.
It really is. This is why it's just like pointing, well, the law says I can do that. The law says that. It's like, we actually need to bring in a set of ethics that actually reside where, I mean, we can use different language around this, but that for me, maybe it's that resides in the heart, and as deep respect from one human being to another. And as someone who's been practicing for 18 years, certainly the way that I work with clients has evolved over the years. The depth of understanding of responsibility continues, to season as I continue to season. But I wish very much a different level, like a depth, was taught in most law schools, because I know, I mean, the things that I have heard, people come and say, well, this lawyer told me this, and you never know. People also hear what they want to hear. It's a game of telephone and all that.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
anyway.
Right. And I want to get a little specific around safety here, because I've spent a lot of money and I've spent a lot of time, and I see people getting interesting advice that even my attorney friends were like, wow, that's risky. And one thing I see is this idea that, circling back to what I was saying before, like, if you're going to start a psychedelic church and your attorney says, no, you're pretty much fine. Um, like, sure, allegedly the First Amendment exists, but it doesn't mean people aren't arrested in the face of it and like have serious consequences. And then there's like state law. You're going to have to do like different kinds of like tax structures for your church. And, and to get real protection, you have to like effectively confess all your crimes to the DEA, which doesn't really seem awesome. And it's wildly expensive. Like, my best guess is at least $1 million to go through that process of getting protection. But what do you see there? Is there some like risky behavior that you see regularly around this?
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I know I have heard that exact same thing. I had friends of mine that I knew for a long time. I lived in California and I lived in LA, and I'm still licensed to practice in California. And I was hearing this, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 5 years ago, some of this, maybe it's some of the same legal advice. I don't know, but no, Ariel, this person said I would be fine. Everything's going to be okay. Yeah, exactly. I have First Amendment protections. But I heard the same thing in cannabis. I mean, I'm just telling you. You see, I know as a lawyer, because I've advised in these spaces, what it actually takes is lengthy conversations for a couple of hours. It takes coming into it and saying, no, my job is actually not to try to get a client. My job is actually to be honest and to give a fulsome picture. and to take the time to do that and to not take any money to do that, to have a vetting conversation. Does this align? Like, you are going to step into doing something that will impact your life. How will that be? Your pocketbook. This is what this would look like. And then also, I just want to circle back to then all of these very important questions around ethics that have to do with communities in other places, and maybe even the medicines themselves as alive beings. I mean, really, like, again, not lawyering from the what's the floor, but
Mm-hmm.
like, and there is no ceiling, it's the stars and the heavens. What is the deepest? How can I, to be clean in that good way, out under that night sky, you know? And so it takes, it really, it was a very big moment for me. I participated in this group with mostly Navajo lawyers, but lawyers from a couple other tribes. And I learned that or Diné culture, the role of the lawyer is to bring the parties back into honjon, which is the beauty way. And the lawyer has these responsibilities and is embedded in community, and just learning other things. It was like, yes, right. The lawyer, this the role of the lawyer can be something that is beautiful and good, that is generative, that is a benefit to community. And it also, there's a lot of unlearning to happen to get to that point, you know, for a
That's a
lot.
really cool way to think about it. Um, Certainly not my experience to date, but I think that's something that we can learn from and aspire towards.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. So that's fascinating. So, some things I noticed in this, like, psychedelic legal space was folks kind of saying, "No, I don't like you. I don't like your ethics, and I don't like your project, so I'm absolutely not working with you." Like, how do you feel about that kind of concept?
Well, I understand. I mean, it depends on where it's coming from. I will be honest. I don't work with most or a number of people who have reached out to me on different projects because there is not alignment. Because I have those kinds of conversations, and I don't want to contribute. If you would think of a legal project as building a structure, and I would give my life energy to all, like, what is that? You have the bricks and then you have that stuff that you lay in between. You know
Yep.
what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't want to do that. I don't feel in a good, that is not, that is not me being a good relative. That's not what that's not what spirit is saying to me, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Like, why contribute something to the world that doesn't feel in alignment with you?
Of course, because
Um,
it's money is not the thing that I am on my knees in front of.
mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So what are some other major topics in kind of the psychedelic legal space that you like to make sure folks are aware of?
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, I don't, to be real with you, I guess there is one thing, over, I think last year I gave a presentation in front of the Minnesota Psychedelics Task Force.
Mm-hmm.
They said, "Okay, you're someone who really went through that cannabis legalization thing in California. What were some lessons that you could give us as policymakers?" And the reason I'm sharing this is because most people are in places where, you know, there aren't there nothing is legal,
Mm-hmm.
actually, or very little
Mm-hmm.
ketamine, maybe, other, so these things included things like have really, like, there needs to be really good public education, really well resourced public education very early on, and not sidelined but centered,
Mm-hmm.
so like, isn't that something that we should be advocating for in our initiatives? The California bill, so I've been participating on the California, basically working group on the psychedelics bill, just as an, as an interested member. Not, I don't want to overstate my involvement,
Sure.
just a person. And one thing that was interesting and felt actually very hopeful about the bill this last time, which the governor didn't sign, was it did have quite a robust section on public education.
Mm.
And I was hopeful for that. I felt like, well, all of the rest of it, I don't know about all that. I don't even know about. I mean, I don't know. There's so many layers, so many layers around all of this, these attempts to quote unquote legalize psychedelics. I mean, I hold a lot of fear, and frankly, I am hesitant. It is hard for me to even identify myself as someone who's involved in the psychedelics community, because
Mm-hmm.
there's been because there because the because I don't know how the psychedelics. I don't know about this question about being a good relative to the plants and indigenous people, and to even each other in ways. I mean, I don't know. I'm really in a process around this, I guess I'll just say. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not unique to psychedelics. It's just a microcosm of this question that is more broad on this planet that's alive for me, you know, that,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of, yeah. So, um, but yeah, you asked about what could be people be thinking about in terms of law. Yeah, so what policies, what laws would be passed, education. Also, you know what are the if there's going to be any sort of regulatory system around something, let's say around mushrooms, for example, um, that there be a lot of thoughtfulness that goes into the drafting of whatever that legislation and framework might look like, that also includes, yes, the health and safety of people involved, and also of the organizations, and what type of organizations would be licensed and permitted. Would they be just like for-profit organizations? Could they be government run? I don't know. That's, nonprofit, public benefit. Is there a way to sort of reduce the inertia of replicating a very capitalistic perspective? I'm really, Joe, I'm really in a place of like, I mean, this is in my bio. The question on my heart: can the overculture legalize psychedelics and do less harm to indigenous people and the medicines themselves? And now the question, as I thought about coming on to this conversation with you, it's like the question isn't just about indigenous people either. It's like people, and it's not even about legalizing. It's like it really. I'm resting in the question of how do we not just replicate almost like that extractive, non-sacred, using, way of relating to medicines, each other, different cultures. I'm really in that, as you can tell.
Yeah, I like it. Thanks for
Mhm.
thanks for sitting it with us so seriously. I uh I take a number of steps back and and just think about like, okay, um what is this kind of like federal apparatus doing? And I see it like purely as harm. and like it's harming people, it's harming the planet, it's like doing so much that's not great. And just the amount of drug war people we have in jail, the amount of people dying from contaminated supply, like if we want to include MDMA in this, which not everybody does, fentanyl has been showing up in MDMA. And then there was carfentanil found on LSD bladder a number of years ago. And it's like ostensibly LSD bladder, but not exactly any LSD there. And so like people can die. And this is a function of the drug war. And I'm like, how do we have like a both and where we want to do this properly? Which kind of what I'm hearing is like, okay, so once full scale, big money capitalism comes in and starts playing in this sandbox, is it going to look like a mess like cookies, for instance, like in California cannabis generally? Like, maybe. And I kind of like how I'm experiencing the progress and movement in Colorado, because like with this decrim frame, with the long tail of implementing the legal frame, the culture's slowly catching up in Colorado to be able to be somewhat safe. It's not necessarily right relationship in the way that you might think about it, but it's at the very least people are learning and feeling a little safer. But I don't want people to get hurt by federal employees or cops at all. Like, how do we make people safer and at the same time then work towards a more fair relationship overall? And this is why I personally kind of like try to sidestep the plant medicine conversation. I'm prone to talk about LSD, MDMA, and a lot of other synthetics more, because I think like there does need to be care on the plants.
Yeah. But Colorado is all natural medicines, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how I think about for whatever reason, I turn a blind eye to the ayahuasca thing, just because it's not really an arena I like to play in, because it feels messy to me, for a lot of reasons. And on mushrooms, I feel somewhat sound about, because they're a worldwide phenomenon. The Mazatec have, one of the longest standing non-secret traditions of mushroom use. And there's, I think, psychedelic mushrooms showing up Europe, Africa, Australia, all over. So it's like, people and mushrooms being kind of inextricably linked. But I feel like they're having a lot more agency than we might suspect, mm-hmm. Which I kind of like,
Yeah.
Radically speculative, and there's a lot of room for not knowing, right? But it's, how can we as a country just stop hurting people, and then also start working towards like what is right just even asking the question, what is right relationship? Because that's not even being asked right now in a big way.
Yeah. I also often think about, I have an uncle who's he's been a traditional, like a medicine doctor for like 45 years and is a pipe man and super respected in our community. And in the 90s, he gave testimony in Congress, before Congress, about tobacco. And I think about that, tobacco, like, okay. And then look what happened when, tobacco touches all of these, those systems. So anyway, even with these other medicines, I guess is my thought, and what I wonder about, it's like, but I think we need to be asking those questions, that very careful, how is this really in service? Is this really good? Are we just doing the same thing? Is this through the medical eyes? Now we're just going to create some licenses. We're going to it's so easy to just kind of crop up something of what has been, because we want to get away from what, we want to help people. We don't want people, everything you said and more. And also, mm-hmm. And I recognize this, in myself, like when I'm sort of not really slowing down, and probably even when I do, it's we can often come from that place. So how do I make myself as available to something that maybe, like I said before, hasn't yet been known? Because I don't know that a lot of the ready answers that we come up with,
Hmm.
is that going to look like Philip Morris in a couple decades and be like, well, we were trying to get away from these things. And I guess I say that again as someone with cannabis. I started getting involved in that in like 2005, 2006 in the Bay Area. And
Hmm.
I remember going and saying, okay, let's go talk to these people in government and say, tax us and regulate us. And why did I say that? Because it was like, well, I don't want these people getting, there are people who are going to prison and jail, and that's real.
Hmm.
And also, looking back, was I holding that space for every possibility, really, like moving in that slow way? No, but I'm trying to answer these things. No, I don't want these people to be harmed.
Hmm.
And so that's the ready answer is, oh, tax us and regulate us. And look what happened. People got taxed and regulated out of existence.
Hmm. Hmm. Right. It's like this. Is there a way for kind of the, yeah, I guess overculture is a great term. Like, is there a way for overculture to be inclusive and not say, no, you all need to stop? Like Colorado did a little bit of it, but it's not robust enough for my tastes. And to your point, like, yeah, regulation, this whole like process of regulation in Colorado has been a little nauseating to watch. I've
Mhm.
been really close to it, and I'm just like,
You have been.
do I actually even want to play in that sandbox? And I'm pretty sure the answer is no.
Yeah.
I will be an activist in that sandbox,
Yeah.
but like it's really a little disgusting, what we've ended up with. Like it's better in a lot of ways than what we've had, but it's not anywhere close to an ideal state. And I think I'm hearing that from you. It's like
Yeah.
maybe that's good, but what is the harm?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we're not really like primed to do like a total cost analysis um, on these kinds of things. Government doesn't operate that way. It's kind of like this idea of externalized costs, maybe.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, if we were to have a brainstorming session right now about what's good about these medicines, psychedelics, let's just call them that. I'll throw out a couple, you throw out a couple, okay? Mine is community, sacred, spirit. Those are words that I would use. That's what's good, connecting back into that. What about you?
Hmm.
Just
I've
play with me.
got like dissolving um, absurd boundaries that make no sense from culture, and creativity offhand.
Yeah, so like if we think about those as like these are the things that are good, that we feel are really good, that are in that night sky. Is that
Yeah.
something that this government knows much about and how to put its arms around?
No.
You know what I mean? So it's like, why did I expect when I was younger that this, something different would come through cannabis moving? Why would I expect something so different to come this time around? You know? So that's why the inquiry for me is less about what is government doing and these existing laws. I'm bored of that. I did that. I sat through
Hmm.
and no, 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 with us like, okay. It's I already know where that's probably going, because also like the hope for me is in the community, the sacred, the spirit, the dissolving of boundaries that we thought were creativity. I love that word that you used. And like connecting in these circles with other human beings and waking up, allowing myself to keep waking up. My God, please, may I continue to wake up, wash my mind. That car wash of the brain, the LSD is such a gift of. least that's been my
Hmm.
experience, you know?
Yeah. Before we wrap here, can you speak a little bit more about your chronic pain journey with psychedelics?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, I had, I've it's been 30, I'm 46, and um a long time ago when I was a kid, I had an infection in my spine and had surgery on my spine. And then my spine experienced a lot of pain, but then it started going through my whole body. But it just wasn't related to that surgery on my spine, because I went to UCLA Pain Clinic and they did all the tests and everything like that. And they were like, actually, your spine, yeah, maybe there's some arthritis in it, but not an abnormal amount. The best I could get was learn neural pathways from some non-traditional but still Western doctor, but still
Mm.
no idea of how to address that. Oh, UCLA Pain Clinic did want to prescribe me a bunch of medicine, prescription drugs, but no idea of how to help, in any way.
Mm.
And so it was really bad though. Um, you know, I had trouble walking. I mean, I literally couldn't walk for about 5 years. Um, and just horrible pain all the time, in my body, all through my body. I remember once being at my therapist's office and she said, let's focus on where it doesn't hurt.
Mm.
And I said, the front of my face. That's the only place.
Mm.
I mean, horrible searing pain, like knives in my legs, in my body, in my like a vice grip on myself, and then learning more and more about how, well, in the Indian side of my family, all of the physical issues that we have, but also then the trauma in our family, understanding, oh, right, this is a whole other thing. Yes, there was a surgery, but there's also all this inherited stuff that's going on that Western medicine could make no sense of.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, it was just really hard for a very long time. And it was praying with these certain of these natural medicines that allowed me to see some things that were before I was alive, specifically like, what happened in that first contact and with, you know, Europeans coming here and inside my own mind and our lineage, and then also to see what it could mean now to be an Anishinaabe woman and ask myself that question and hold that in my heart. That helped to heal my legs. And it was deep work, as people know who do that deep work. It wasn't a pill that fixed me right immediately. It was an, a pulling out and an unearthing. Woo! Getting free of those demons, like really literally. And now I can walk.
That's outstanding. I
It
love
is
that.
it is outstanding.
Yeah. Um, and like, yeah, the chronic pain stuff is so core to my heart. I just know so many people suffering so severely,
Oh my gosh.
and I'm hoping we can keep it going. That's you participated in our recent summit, the Psychedelics and Pain Association slash Clusterbusters event, and yeah, Clusterbusters event sponsored by PPA. That's what it was. And it was just really great to like have your story there and have so many people kind of sharing their stories and their research and just knowing that it's going to get better. Because the opioid thing is fine, but not good enough and
Totally.
plenty of problems.
Yep. And so
Mm.
many people are suffering from chronic pain, and there's very little hope. There's very little hope for them. So I'm so grateful to you for the work that you are doing, and please don't let it go, and I won't either. I mean, I'll tell you, it's that when I got that healing in my legs, that deepened my resolve and commitment to this, even though it's hard sometimes because there's so many layers, this psychedelics community. I was like, oh my God, I experienced this beautiful healing, and I want that for others, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. And I have this hyperbolic statement, Ariel, that I say, and I kind of fishing for people to shoot me down, but I only got shot down once so far.
Okay.
And it was, I think if we can figure this chronic pain thing out with psychedelics, we might be able to reduce chronic opioid scripts by 80% worldwide, which would be such a public health win.
Yeah.
And not to mention just getting people back to their lives.
Yeah.
Like, it's, as you've experienced, crippling and, isolating. You're like, I'm not going to go have any fun because I can't predict how bad I'm going to feel in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, thanks for sharing that. And I'm
Of course.
happy you're doing in process.
Yeah. I mean, me too. I'm so grateful.
Yeah.
So happy for you too.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know. I've shared my story a little bit just for people to have a little context. It's like a crazy amount of chronic pain, like probably since, you get out of college and all of a sudden you're sitting at a desk all day, like that kind of like transition from like super athletic to like, and then stress, and then too much coffee, and then booze, and then all the stresses of contemporary life. And you're like, oh God, chronic pain, couldn't figure out a solution, spent so much money and time. And then, LSD, psilocybin, MDMA, fish, and plenty of other, bands came into my world, and all of a sudden not much pain was left. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. So beautiful. I mean, to me, when I hear that story, what I almost visually see is like music, like literally like music notes and like good vibes and like moving through your body, moving through your heart, and just almost like, all of that, just like moving out, and that song of life, being sung back into you.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah. I had a weird framing once of like, am I in like a weird, like Greek mystery cult around music, like the Orpheus thing, or Pythagorean cult? Who knows? I don't know what cult I'm in, I guess. But maybe I'll figure it out someday. But thank you for hearing that and reflecting that back to me. Was there anything we missed that you'd want to include here?
No, just gratitude for you inviting me again. I know I said that, and thankfulness for anyone who might be listening, and just may some good things come from this conversation. May some good words be planted. More love, more kindness, more caring. May that be so,
Yes. Absolutely agree. Yeah. A lot more kindness is needed here in psychedelia and caring. All right, Ariel Clark, thank you so much. And I hope we get to do it again.
Thank you.